So we don't know how the war is going to end. We know that it can go on for some time into 2025, maybe even into 2026. We know that they both sides disagree about what they want to get out of some kind of process of sitting down and settling things. Russia still seems to have maximalist objectives. Ukraine can't give up territory, or if it does give up territory, that would be a pretty significant blow to it. Just like if Russia gave up territory that it claims as its own, it would be a pretty significant blow. So I don't see a lot of hope for something happening on January 20th, magically solving it, Trump sitting down and having a deal in 24 hours. That's foolish. Even Trump has admitted that that's not going to happen. Now, what we want to look for next is, well, if they do come to some kind of agreement, what does the agreement do? And will it stop a future war from happening? And Anders Puck Nielsen actually put out a great video about this. What is a Russian victory plan? And a number of you have pointed that out to me and contacted me one way or another and said, hey, you've got to see this. I agree. This is good stuff. So I'm going to show you about a minute's worth of what he has to say here. And then I'll direct you back to his actual video itself so that you can listen to the rest of the video and hear the rest of it. But what I want you to hear is that they have goals that are not the same. Like, it's not about just territory, it's about something else. Let's listen to what he has.
I've made videos about Ukraine's plans for victory and how they envision the war ending in a way that's positive for them, but it's been a while since I've talked about it from the Russian perspective. So in this video, I want to talk about how we should understand the Russian war effort and what their goals are. And it's an important conversation because many people in the West have sort of misconceptions about what the Russians are fighting for, and therefore they also have incorrect ideas about what a peace deal could look like. So let's talk.
So if we were to stop right now and just say, well, what should each side get? Russia would say it wants Russian land, that is all of those 4 oblasts that it has grabbed from Ukraine and calls part of Russia now. And Russia would say Ukraine can't be part of NATO, and maybe there's some language laws or something that Ukraine has to change to protect Russian speakers or something along those lines. And maybe even some kind of guarantees that they'll not be able to, that they'll have to disarm or something along those lines. Ukraine wants almost exactly the opposite. Ukraine wants all its land back. It wants Russia off of its place. It wants its children back, and it wants maybe some reparations and some agreement that will allow it to never be invaded by Russia again. And that probably means NATO. I can't see what other agreement outside of NATO that could be. But it's not just about Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson. It's about more than that. None of this would have happened if in 2014 we didn't have the Euromaidan revolution. And the Euromaidan revolution came because Viktor Yanukovych crossed the people, like what's happening in Georgia right now, and instead of taking the European deal, took the Russian deal, and the people rose up. And that meant that Ukraine was spinning out of Russia's orbit. And in Georgia, they're doing the same kind of thing right now. And you got to watch what's going on in Georgia, because the people of Georgia are well aware of what's happened to their neighbor within the last decade or so.
Talk about it. The most important thing to understand about the war in Ukraine is that it's not a war about territory. It is by far the biggest misconception about the war, that it's a conflict over who gets to keep the most territory once the war is over. If you look at the Western media, almost all the articles will be discussing the war in this way. That's why I keep stressing this point whenever I make these videos. It is simply wrong to understand it as primarily a war about territory. What the war is really about is political influence over all of Ukraine, and that's the key to understanding Russia's war aims as well, what it is they're fighting for. When Putin launched the invasion in 2022, he didn't have the ambition to conquer all of Ukraine and to make it a part of Russia. The goal was to achieve regime change in Ukraine and to insert a government that would be more sort of favorable to Russia and that would be under Putin's control.
And that makes sense, because the way that the invasion went was like to overwhelm Ukraine. It was like coming from these 4 or 5 different places or 3 major attack points. Like, whoa, what's going on? If they were trying to take the country, they should have done it differently tactically, but they were trying to overwhelm, chase out the government, and have this regime change. And if they had regime change and Zelensky was out and one of Putin's puppets was in place, like a Lukashenko type figure that could be in charge of Ukraine, all of this would have magically gone away. But then Ukraine would also be under the boot of Russia, and that's exactly what Russia wants, is to have the Ruskiy Mir extended back to its former glory of covering Ukraine as well. That is the objective here. It's to have a favorable outcome for the government that is going to be within the Russian orbit. And he's going to go on and talk more about this. So I'm going to point you back to this video. I'll put this at the end screen. I'll put this in the comments below, and you can see him roll out this thesis even further. Any peace deal that will be made is not about which bits of land Ukraine or Russia get. It's about how much control and influence Russia still has over Ukraine in order to dictate what Ukraine will or will not do, or how free Ukraine will be from Russia's control. And that's why NATO membership is so important to the Ukrainians. All right, tell me what you thought about that. Put it in the comments below. I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say. And please, now I'm urging you, please go watch this video by Anders Puck-Nielsen next. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, and the subscribes. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.